know that music, and you know who's coming up as a result of that music. It's 8:23, KTRS, the Big 550. We're joined by Tony Messenger, St. Louis Post-Dispatch columnist. Good morning, Tony.
Good morning, Jay. Good morning, Kelly. How's everybody doing today?
Very well. St. Louis, Missouri was in the spotlight, national attention yesterday as a result of the vice president coming, but more importantly, surrounding the effort to repair the damage done physically, literally and figuratively at the Jewish cemetery in University City. And you wrote about that cemetery and some of the feelings surrounding the vandalism and what's going on there.
Yeah, I went there Tuesday afternoon after the news had broken Monday night and Tuesday morning that it had been vandalized over the weekend. And so I went there Tuesday afternoon before we knew the vice president was going to come out yesterday, and walked the cemetery and the rows of the toppled gravestones and just talked to people who were out there, who have relatives out there, many of them just sort of wandering, looking to see if their relatives, graves had been toppled. And, it was so poignant and touching to have so many people just wanting to help and reconnecting. In some cases, these were Jewish folks who hadn't been out to the cemetery in a while and knew that their relatives were there, and they were just reconnecting to their family histories. And the thing that has made this such a national story is it ties directly to a lot of the statements that President Trump has been making about Muslims and immigrants, and his lack of strong statements when the various Jewish community centers all over the country were being evacuated with bomb threats, and his failure to even mention the Jewish people on Holocaust Remembrance Day. And so this has tied into that national story. And a Muslim activist from New York and some others got together and started one of those internet fundraising sites. And they've now raised, I checked this morning, over $90,000 to help rebuild the cemetery. So this outpouring of support from people of multiple faith backgrounds is what has really become the national story, and what Vice President Pence talked about yesterday.
Right. I think what the vice president said and did yesterday, what the governor said and did yesterday, what the Muslim group has done in raising the money, what the community here has done, has been forceful and moving and is the right thing. But back to your point about the president, even when he did speak out, which was late, he read it. It was like it was almost, there was no energy, no emotion to it. He literally read from a piece of paper.
And this is the thing. I would encourage people. I got some criticism yesterday from some Trump fans who didn't like my column because the president was criticized. And first of all, I pointed out to them, look, I was there talking to Jewish people who honestly believe that Trump has created this atmosphere that makes this kind of anti-Semitism more likely. So this is their opinion, and it's their opinion strongly, and I'm going to respect that opinion when I'm walking a cemetery with them as they're crying and mourning their relatives and the violence that took place. But beyond that, the vice president also referred to it as hate and anti-Semitism. And so you can't have it both ways. You can't have the vice president calling it hate and then Trump fans saying you can't call it hate. They don't know that it's a hate crime yet. It's clearly awful what happened, and you can't disconnect. And back to your point, I would encourage people to take a look at. It's easy to find on YouTube or on Google or whatever. Look at the president's statement. I believe it was yesterday or the day before, in which he denounced for the first time all of the anti-Semitic attacks, specifically the bomb scares in Jewish community centers. And like you said, he's reading the statement. It shows no energy, no sincerity. There's just nothing to it. If you've watched the president, you know when he's being the president. Then go back and watch the tape from a week ago when he actually held his first long news conference where he took multiple questions from mainstream media, and look at the question from the Jewish reporter that specifically asks about the bomb threats to the Jewish community centers when they're happening, and watch his response. And he tells that Jewish reporter to sit down, and he tells him, your question's too complicated, and he proceeds to talk about how he won the election by record numbers, and by the way, the numbers that he starts to quote are inaccurate. But he turns a question about the Jewish people being attacked in record numbers of anti-Semitic, bomb threats to Jewish centers all over the country. He talks about that. He turns that into a question about himself, and he disrespects the Jewish reporter who asked the question. Compare those two tapes, and it's just so clear who the man actually is at his core.
All right. There was a lot of good, though, that has come out of this bad. And, you wrote your column before yesterday. I'm sure you've been talking to people since then. How would you describe the aftermath up to this point?
In St. Louis in particular, it's one of those unifying events. It brings people together. And I'm going to write a follow-up column about this probably for Sunday. A friend of mine who is director of the Forward Through Ferguson organization had a Facebook post in which she talked about how all of these things are connected. Our own divisions in St. Louis, black and white, and Muslim, Jewish, Christian, all of those things are connected. And this is one of those events that brings people together to help them get beyond themselves and see people and empathize with people who are different than them, at least in terms of faith background, because we all have loved ones buried somewhere, and we want them respected, and we want their burial place respected. And so it brought people together in a meaningful way. I think the governor and the vice president and everybody who went out there over the last couple of days, these are all people who are sincerely moved by this and don't want this kind of hate to happen in our community. And so my friend's Facebook post, challenged all of us. If we're moved by this, we should be moved by other forms of division within our community and do things in our daily lives to try to unify St. Louis and unify our neighborhoods, and when we meet people who are different than us, try to understand those differences and bring ourselves together as a community rather than always divide ourselves.
Absolutely. Tony Messenger, St. Louis Post-Dispatch columnist. Don't always agree with you, do always read you. Thank you once again for an insightful piece.
Thanks, Jay. Good to talk to you.
It's 8:30 KTRS, the Big 550.